Hi, everybody. I'm Kanisha from boldlivingtoday.com, and I'm here with the awesome, amazing, creative, stunning, stellar Courtney Hanna-McNamara. I'm in California, and she is in Illinois, and we're going to have a great conversation. But before we get started to that, I want to welcome you to the Creative Educator Collective. I am here along with my colleague, Carrie Knudsen, and we are doing these great interviews that we call Shift and Tell, kind of like show and tell, where we talk to creative educators about their journey, their passion, and the path they've taken to shift within their educational career, shift out of it, to be in a mid-shift, or whatever it takes for them to stay in a teaching type environment or job, but still do things on their own. And part of it is our goal is to share some actual real life things that people are doing, because sometimes people go to a training or they go to a workshop and it all sounds really great, really exciting, really motivational in the moment. But then you say, how do I actually do that while I'm living my life, while I'm parenting, while I'm doing PTA, volunteering, whatever the case is? And that is the purpose of these Shift and Tell interviews. So as mentioned, we have Courtney Hanna-McNamara here today. And Courtney and I used to be colleagues in Colorado when we both worked there. And Courtney is a former teacher and an instructional coach turned blogger. She has a fabulous blog. She's an Etsy shop owner, and the name of her shop is Larking. And she's an at-home parent to two gorgeous little girls. But in addition to all of that, Courtney is a freelance writer, and I consider her a budding photographer, but I'll let her talk more about that. But she takes gorgeous and stunning pictures of her life and of her adventures and travels, which I find very satisfying. And then she's also a violinist in her community orchestra, and she is making strides to turn that into a different type of work funnel, work option for herself down the road. So we will hear from Courtney. Hey, Courtney.
Hi, thank you
How
so
are you?
much. Good.
Good. Oh, yay. I'm so thrilled to be here with you. I feel like we met at a time when you were just launching your professional career, out
Oh,
of,
yeah.
yeah. And so it's been really exciting for me to see your path, to see your shifts, to see your journey. And I'm really excited to talk about that with you today.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. So tell us right now, I mean, I gave your introduction, but, what is your current job? And, job is defined by you or your position or your role. Like, what are you doing these days?
Wow. Yesterday, I just sent my youngest off to kindergarten. So I feel like starting something new as of today, which is perfect timing for this interview. But really, my full-time job for the past, I don't know, almost 7.5 years has been parent. I was teaching full-time, and then I quit my teaching job to stay home with my girls because I felt like really, as an educator, I wanted to be educating them the most. But being just a stay-at-home parent never felt fulfilling to me. I needed to have something for me. So these past 7.5 years, I've been trying to do lots of other things to inspire myself creatively. So I opened an Etsy shop. I never really saw myself as an entrepreneur, but I wanted to do something that was a creative outlet. And it's also nice, both as an educator and as a parent, to have something you're working on where there's a finished project at the end that you can say, oh, look, I did this. Because you don't get that with teaching, you don't get that with parenting. So that was something that was fulfilling to me and that I've kept doing. And I love to write. I've always loved to write. So I started a blog about my life, book reviews, those kinds of things. And it's been sort of off and on over the years as parenting has ebbed and flowed with, what's busy in this season. And I've just recently started really pushing harder with doing some freelance writing opportunities. I did an interview this summer. It still is being sort of final check with the senior editors at the online magazine where I've submitted, but that was really big for me, a step that I had not taken before, interviewing someone who was a former editor at the New York Times, which was a scary step for me to take, but I felt like I want to move forward with this and see where this is going. And then, yeah, as you mentioned, I'm a violinist. I've played violin since I was 5. I think if you asked people who knew me in high school, they would have thought, oh, yeah, she's going to go on to be a musician. And then that wasn't what I did at all. But I've been finding more time to play recently with my community orchestra, and I've started doing some training for maybe getting back into teaching in that arena instead of in the classroom.
That's amazing. So, I was hearing that you are really listening to all your different passions, different areas that allow you to create. And I also heard a little bit of innovation within that. And, with, managing your family, your beautiful family, and, being as active as you are as a parent and within your community, when you are looking at all these different types of things you're interested in, like, how do you prioritize that? And I know that's not really one of the questions we discussed, but I'm just curious about that because people would say, look at her, like that's a lot of awesome stuff she's doing. How's she doing that?
Yeah, I say yes to too many things, definitely. And it's hard to find a balance sometimes. I say yes to volunteering at my kids' school, and I say yes to things in my church community. I say yes to a lot of things that then later I think, oh, I don't know, is this really what I want to be spending my time doing? But my husband has been really supportive about, wanting me to feel creatively challenged. And so he works really hard to make his schedule work so that I can leave at night to go do things once he's home from work, go to orchestra rehearsal at night or go to a meeting. Um, and that has been hugely helpful. So having support at home. And then, yeah, I try to be an organized person. I think that's educators often are the types who make lists and are keeping their calendars really carefully. And so I try to just think, this week, what can I accomplish? This month, what can I accomplish? What are the things that I really want to be doing moving forward? Over the summer, I really had my Etsy shop take a back seat because I've really been trying to focus on writing the piece that I was talking about before and some other kind of more personal projects. And so, you have to make those kinds of decisions. But I try to keep my options open too and feel like, in this season, maybe something's going to come to the fore a little bit more. In this season, something else. Just haven't landed exactly yet on what's next for me. So I'm trying to balance between everything and just kind of have my toe in where I can, not shut any doors too hard.
I love that. I love that. I kind of heard like you have these seasonal shifts around prioritizing different projects and different things and like, keeping your family kind of like at the forefront of how that
Oh,
all
yeah.
plays out. I can totally relate to that because that's also how I operate and how I work, run my business, but it's part-time primarily because of my husband's travel schedule and me wanting to be a very hands-on involved parent with my family. And even though I have one off in college and I still have one here, there's still a huge level of involvement and support that goes in. And I'm happy to have the schedule that doesn't deplete me and I can do both of those things or all of those things and still feel like I have time for myself. So I
Right.
love hearing that about your seasonal shifts. So when you initially became an educator, when you thought about
Mhm.
going into teaching, what was your initial vision for your career?
You know, I was trying to think back about this, and I really wanted to become an educator because I had had some inspiring teachers in high school. I think, that's true for a lot of teachers that we
Yeah.
had somebody who really made an impact. And by my senior year, I had really decided, I want to go into teaching. And we had this, I think it was like top 10% breakfast or something for the students who were graduating in the top 10% of the class. And we all had to submit a little statement about where do you see yourself in 10 years? And I remember thinking at the time how strange it was that all of the girls, young women, were talking about, being married and having a family, that was their 10-year vision. And mine was, I'm going to be working in education on a national level to make changes. And I just, even though family is hugely important to me and central to who I am, that was not anywhere in my statement at the time. And even as an 18-year-old, I remember thinking, this is so strange. Like, I wonder why that didn't cross my mind to put in my little personal statement. Those were big 18-year-old plans. I don't think, um, sort of once I got into it, that I thought, oh, I'm going to be, moving to DC and doing any kind of lobbying or anything like that. But I wanted to do something in education that was innovative, that was starting something new, that was changing things that weren't working, making the system as a whole better instead of just in my individual classroom.
I love that though, but it's good that you gave yourself that space to have a different vision.
Yeah.
At that time in your life. I mean, 18-year-old, I think back to my 18-year-old self, all over the place.
Yeah.
Just like all over. So, I see you, and I remember, being there for your interview when we were working at that job in Colorado, and I was listening to you answer the questions, but I was listening to the words you chose, and everything was very open, and everything was very much in a space where I'm like, oh, she could grow that. Everything was like a seed you were planting when you were talking about it. And I found that very refreshing because I know you wanted to get the right answers to get the job, but I felt like you were really trying to showcase who you were coming to us at that time. And so I see that in you, in your writings, and when I follow you on Instagram and, some of the articles I've read that you've published, just kind of an openness to life when it presents itself, and then, how we are able to connect, react, and all of that. So given that piece of kind of how I see your approach to living, what would you say your top 5 accomplishments have been as an educator? And that can be over the course of your entire career, not just when you were affiliated with one particular institution.
Let's see. So the school where I worked, where we both worked together, that was my first real full-time job teaching. I had taught a year before that. I was supposed to be a student teacher, but the school had realized that they were short a teacher and couldn't hire anybody right before the school year started. So they hired me instead on a provisional license, which gave me an awesome, like, here you go, throw you into the fire kind of experience that was really good for me. And I felt really honored that they trusted me to take that on as a brand new teacher. So the school where I worked in Colorado, I was there for 5 years, and even though it was my first teaching job, I felt like, by the last couple of years, they really trusted me to take on pretty big leadership responsibilities there. I was a grade level lead. I was a curriculum lead within my department. And I became an instructional coach, specifically working with teachers in the sciences, which was exciting for me because my real passion, since those teachers I was talking about before who had inspired me in high school, that was in an interdisciplinary class where I really started becoming passionate about seeing connections between disciplines and not just, pigeonholing, oh, we only read novels in this class. No, we could read a novel, to learn about history. We could read it to learn about science. We could read it to learn about whatever. And so getting to be an instructional coach to help science teachers, even though that was not my background, that was something that I felt really proud of. And when we moved here to Illinois and I took the job as a literacy and instructional coach at a public school here, that was my job again. I worked specifically with the science department at my school to help them integrate literacy into what they were teaching. And that's something that I feel like, is still at the core of who I am and what I want to somehow work on moving forward is that cross-curricular, seeing connections between things, erasing boundaries between disciplines, seeing how we can, take things from disparate areas, music or art or English or science, and integrating them, putting them together in some way to create something new. I also, at that school in Colorado, got roped into coaching speech and debate by a teacher friend of mine, which ended up being such a great fit for me. And 2 years in a row, we got kids to the national tournament, which, as a tiny school with a brand new team was so exciting and so rewarding. So that was a huge accomplishment for me. And then the school where I worked here for a couple of years before my daughters were born, my job, I was hired as the literacy facilitator, but really what I was doing when I was working there was creating a program for at-risk ninth grade students. They had an idea for something that they wanted to try, but they didn't have anything in place and didn't really know how to make it happen. And so I worked with a PE teacher, and I worked with the science department. I worked with teachers across a variety of disciplines to create this program for incoming ninth grade students who were in the bottom 30% of their class, but were not on any kind of IEP or 504, getting any kind of help otherwise. And this was, how do we help these kids not fall through the cracks in their first year transitioning to high school? So we started this innovative program for them that had a 0-hour PE class to get their heart rate going, get their brains ready for school. We did some tracking with them so that they were in similar classes together during the day and had a cohort so that they felt a sense of community. We had social workers who worked with them. I met with them in a couple of classes a day and was sort of a liaison in a way between teachers and being in touch with their parents, making sure they had what they needed. We had study groups together and did all kinds of things. And that was really exciting for me to be a part of it. It ended up being such a different job than I thought it was going to be, being hired as a literacy facilitator, because I really was working so far outside of the realm of what what most literacy coaches would think that they were being hired to do. But it was a good fit for me because I was getting to create something exciting and new and really work to help these kids be successful in a school where, they could pretty easily just be lost in the big crowd of students in a public school.
I mean, Courtney, that's also amazing. I'm writing down, I'm taking lots of notes here. I hear you talking about leadership, cross-curricular opportunities, erasing learning barriers, a huge service piece, and having community connections. But it seems like it was all under this umbrella of being creative. Here's our options to serve this particular community, to serve these kids, to serve these teachers, to serve this team. Let's get creative in all these tenets. I mean, that to me, especially when I think about my traditional years in education, didn't always seem to be like something that was offered all the time. That's amazing. And I was going to ask you, how did your creativity influence and affect these accomplishments? But you completely highlighted that, like, taking a step away or I would say lengthening or making a wider options for what you would do as a literacy instructional coach and just really going for that. I mean, that's very inspiring. And I hope anybody who's hearing this, who is in a role similar to yours or who's creating a role, would kind of keep a creative openness to all the things that this could be. Yeah, you should write something about that for, for your instructional coach peeps. They would need to hear that. So, okay. I know you were talking about, when your children were born, you decided, like, as a teacher, as a professional teacher, I should be, the first teacher of my children and do all the things that, as, in a classroom, when we say, oh, I wish parents would do X, Y, Z, you're like, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. Did you initially deal with any like identity risk? Like, okay, I've worked really hard in my career and built this and gotten all this education, formal education, on the job education, and now I'm going to stop, pause, halt, like whatever the words were for yourself. How did you handle that identity risk and that shift?
Yeah, it was so hard at first, really hard for me. I remember talking to my husband and saying, when our daughter was born, you had the difficult task, and it is hard, of adding something to your already really full plate. You had to add parenting into this mix of all kinds of things that you already are. And I said, but for me, I feel like people just dumped everything off of my plate. And now, Mom, that's it. That's what's on my plate. And I don't have any of the rest of this anymore. Like, all of my safety nets are gone. And I'm just doing this job that I have no idea how to do. And, I'm alone at home. And I was voted most likely to succeed in my high school class. And now look at me at home with my kid, not doing anything. But of course, being a parent is hugely important and rewarding in its own way. Like I said before, with teaching, it's the same kind of thing where, it's day to day to day, working so hard, and you don't always see the incremental gains. you don't have a supervisor giving you a certificate like, good job, mom. Look at this amazing thing you did with your kids. So yeah, that was hard for me. I would say the first year, I think for anybody making that kind of shift was hard, but definitely I felt I had never really known, do I want to have kids or not? But I knew if I did, I wanted to stay home with them. I felt like that was important. And so I just kept reminding myself of that, this is a choice. I'm lucky to make this choice. Some people don't get to stay home. I have the opportunity to stay home. So I'm going to make the most out of this. This is not forever. That's the other thing I kept telling myself too. This is a gift I can give to my kids, being home with them, something that we've prioritized in our family. And, other people make different decisions, and that's totally fine and right for them. For us, this is the decision we're making. And when they go off to school, then I get to decide what's next. And, I want to go back to work and do something that's fulfilling and creative. Being at home has been really creative in totally challenging ways that I wasn't always expecting. Yeah, it was hard. And I think for anybody making those kinds of career moves, whether it's to stay home, whether it's I have to get out of education because I'm burned out, and I just need something else because teaching is really, really draining. It's hard to make that shift and to feel like I put in all this time and effort. For me, I think also, you could see a direct connection between work as an educator and then educating kids at home. I felt like there was a skill set that I could take with me a little bit. It wasn't just I'm completely abandoning everything that I've been trained to do. So that helped. But I definitely wasn't talking about British literature with my 2-year-old. So
No. No, I understand exactly what you're saying in the scope of the shift. I mean, when I shifted out of a full-time traditional educational job, and my kids were still young, but not as young as yours, and I had help and support of my mother-in-law and my husband, but still my identity, I had to recalibrate that, and I had to think about what I was making it mean, and was it too
Right.
much? Was it over the top? Like, what was that all about? And even before like getting going on my business, I had to get my mind right about that and kind of tackle, any fears and apprehensions. So it is a process. Yeah. Yeah. Even if you're ready to shift, it's still a process to, get to that kind of safe mental space, I would say. But I got help around that. So I didn't do it all by myself because
that's key.
Yeah, because it probably would have taken that much longer to do.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, you have this great shift. I would call it a great shift because you're still doing things that, support any type of job you would go back to if it was in a formal education. So what kinds of freedoms did you get when you made this shift? When you decided that you wanted to be mostly at home, but still pursue your creative interests?
It's funny to think about them as, is it freedoms? Is it like, oh man, where am I and what's happening? Depending on your perspective. Yeah, I mean, so I said before, my husband has been really supportive. He has been awesome in saying, you know what, take your time and figure out what you want to do next. And that has helped a lot. I've been really trying to explore everything that I'm interested in and not feel guilty for exploring things that I don't end up following.
Yeah.
And that, it's worth taking the opportunity to try something. And then if you decide, this is not for me, that's okay. And it has been a gift to have the time to do that. To have like, oh, I want to take a night class just to see if this is something that I want to pursue. And having him, put the girls to bed so that I can be gone, and attempting something like that has been huge. So, yeah, I think, being a parent and having a full-time job and trying to make that kind of a shift would have been really hard. So for me, that's the big freedom, is the time piece of, yeah, I've been at home with them, but I don't have this obligation of continuing my teaching career and trying to find then something else to do on top of it. Having that extra time piece of, okay, I'm just at home now. I've got these years to focus on my kids, but then in the back of my mind to be thinking, what do I want to try? What might be next to explore? I keep circling back around to teaching and education. I just cannot get away from that because it's in me. But, looking for ways that, maybe I want to try teaching in this different type of a venue, in this different type of a setting. Maybe I don't want to teach English anymore. Maybe I want to teach this. So having the freedom of time to really think and try and ponder and reject has been huge.
And reject. Like, you don't have to take it, we don't have to take all the scraps when we're in the shift mode.
Right.
I mean, I just love how you saying, having the ability to explore things, but in a guilt-free way. I feel like when we become adults, we don't give ourselves that gift, and the educators really don't give themselves a gift. Like, I don't have enough time for that. I've already invested this much. And we just, really hold tightly onto things that, we could easily let go or put on a shelf and come back and revisit later. Right. We don't have it all now to use right now. It's there. One thing that you didn't mention that I was hoping you were going to mention, so I'm going to put it out there, but one of the great freedoms I saw in your shifts was when your family got to go to New Orleans for a year. Oh yeah. I thought that was so fabulous.
Absolutely. I think it didn't feel like my freedom because it was based on my husband's job, but yeah, absolutely. We took that opportunity. He got a fellowship to research at Tulane. So we were down in New Orleans for a year. And yeah, that was huge, getting to change where we were. I mean, we're so lucky that his job affords him that opportunity. We're already trying to think about, will we be able to do this again? The next time he has a sabbatical year, our girls would be in middle school, which would be both a terrible and a great time to be somewhere else. So yeah, I mean, that was huge. And that was a time when I really tried to do a lot of that trying of things like I just talked about, just exploring. I interviewed a bunch of educators who've made changes in what they did, you being one of them, just to sort of start picking people's brains. Like, I know my own big shift is kind of coming once my girls are in school. And so I really started the ball rolling of what's next? What are the opportunities that are out there for people who have this skill set but want to do something a little bit different than traditional classroom instruction?
Yeah. I do like that you pointed out the thing of initially you didn't feel like the opportunity to live in New Orleans was your part of your shift because, of your husband's job. But I have to say, we continue to move because of my husband's job. Myself, we have moved several times, and, I always have to look at it that because I'm in education, I have the freedom to move. Totally. Because, if I was in another industry, I would be always worried about finding another gig, job opportunity. Yeah. Whereas educators, I mean, it's a wide net. People are always having babies, so there's always kids to educate. And I just feel like that's another freedom that we, having this particular background, skill set, will always have. And we can, everybody needs a teacher somewhere in some capacity. Absolutely. So yeah, I keep reinventing myself in my work, so to speak, like every time we have a big move.
Right. Well, I mean, that was for us from Colorado to here. I was teaching while my husband was in grad school. And when he got the professorship here, I had no idea what was next for me. Right. I had been, 5 years pretty traditional, even though it was not necessarily a totally traditional school, a traditional classroom teacher. And then coming here, I had no idea what opportunities would be available. I thought, am I going to go back to grad school? Am I going to be, doing some kind of online teaching? I didn't know what there was. And then when this job opened up as literacy coach, I don't have a master's in literacy coaching, but I applied for it because of the work that I had done at the school in Colorado. And they were willing to take a chance on me. And it was, okay, I'll try something completely different, and, ended up being a fit. So yeah, I think that is something we're really lucky to have the chance to do, that kind of changes, those kinds of changes, if the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, that's true. It's exhausting, but exciting, I find, especially when you're moving with kids. So yeah, I would just say don't move when your kids are having braces or orthodontia, because, you can't transfer that. We did that. Gosh. That's one of my things about shifts. Like, just don't do that. Like me. So, Courtney, how can people find out more about you, your work, your Etsy shop? Tell us where to find your information and what we can, expect or experience with you.
Sure. So I'm in the process of redoing my blog to a different format. So it will be shortly, like within the next month or so, at CourtneyHMC.com. So a little bit easier to find. Right now I'm at a Blogspot address, which is longer to type out, but it will be CourtneyHMC.com, which will be easy. And on Instagram, I'm Courtney.hmc. That's my username on Instagram. As you said, my Etsy shop is Larking. So you can just search for that on Etsy. And yeah, I think those are the big ways to find me.
That's awesome. And I'll have all the links and information in the video notes so you can see what Courtney's doing and follow her and check out her creativity and how she's continuing to shift, because she says she's in a mid shift, and it's okay to be in different areas of the shift. I am in different areas of my own shift, and it's a sweet spot to be in when you have enough creative ideas and you're ready to trust yourself and your previous skills and expertise to take you there, I would say.
Thanks, Kanisha.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad I had you today. And you all can find out more about the Creative Educator Collective. Our website is creativeeducatorcollective.com. We're on Instagram and Twitter, Creative Educator Collective, and also on Facebook. And you can learn more about my work, the Bold Living Today community, at boldlivingtoday.com. And I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Kanisha Baynard, and also on Facebook at Kanisha Baynard Coaching. Thank you so much, Courtney. Have a great school year and keep creating.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh.